Welcome to Faith Bowl 4. You know, sports have the ability to not only build bodies and strength, but also to build character and even faith. I'm Vin Scully, and in this program, we'll talk with five-time Major League All-Star Mike Sweeney, his father and high school coach, Mike Sweeney Sr., and with Kristen Sheehan, an expert in children's coaching and director of Notre Dame's Play Like a Champion program. I've been fortunate. I've spent almost 62 years broadcasting professional sports, and upon reflection, it's interesting I'm more thinking and memorying about losses rather than victories. My first year with the Dodgers, they lost in the 10th inning of the final game of the season. My second year with the Dodgers, they lost in the 9th inning of the third game of a playoff series with the Giants. And what stuck in my mind was not those days when everyone was jumping with joy and patting themselves on the back after hitting a home run, but how they took defeat. General Douglas MacArthur, when he was back at West Point at the military academy, he talked about the importance of sports building character that would produce on the fields of battle, not only accepting victory in the proper spirit, but also how you handle defeat. And that's really perhaps the most important part about sports, building the character, bringing out the best in a person, especially when things are not going very well. The Dodgers have had some very fortunate managers, men who have inspired players, some by making noise and high-spirited like a Tommy Lasorda, others like a Walter Alston, who was very quiet, exuded strength, and the players got from that strength the ability to suffer defeat. Oh, it's easy to go out and pat a fella on the back and say, nice going, you've hit a home run. But what about the guy who strikes out with the bases loaded to end the game? I remember a friend of mine in college who went on to play pro ball, and his name was Larry Miggins, one of the finest young men I've ever met. Larry, a staunch Catholic whose faith was as strong as you could possibly be. Larry was playing in the minor leagues, AAA, and he was playing the outfield. Somebody hit a long fly ball, and Larry went back, made a diving, maybe catch, maybe not. But he was so far away from the infield with his back to home plate that the umpires did not see whether he caught the ball or not, and it was going to decide the game. Well, would you believe it? They stopped the game. The umpire went out and said, Larry, tell us, did you catch it or didn't you? Well, now that's wrong. Larry would have said, look, you're the umpire, that's your responsibility, and dodged the question. But he didn't. He said to the umpire, no, I trapped the ball, it was a base hit, and they lost the game. But who came out of that stronger and bigger than Larry Miggins? The outcome of the game meant nothing. Although the fans booed him at the time, in retrospect, they realized what an honorable man he really was and is to this day. Talking about honorable men, well, we'll be back with Coach Mike Sweeney Sr. on Faith Bowl 4.
My hitting around, he's a great hitting coach, he has a lot of experience.
What makes him a good coach is his work ethic. He makes us do everything 100%.
Compared to other coaches I've had, Coach Sweeney has brought not just respect, but just the amount of level he brought us up to.
Make sure that we fulfill our goals and make sure we meet everything.
He knows how to work with the kids a lot. I really enjoy playing for him.
I want them to be the type of kids that the other kids on this campus aspire to be.
We have a little burden on us to be above the rest of the athletes, the rest of the students at the school.
It helps you be a better student, helps you be a better person around the campus, and helps you be a leader not only on the baseball field, but also in the classroom.
Taught us have respect for ourselves, for the teachers, and for our students as well, to stay positive.
I really enjoy being that leader.
And it goes a lot farther than being just baseball players. Just being good kids, and they understand that, and a number of them have turned themselves around.
And now we're like role models at the school.
We have an understanding that on the field, I am the parent, and I take care of these kids like they're my own children. I've got 8 children, And I don't treat these guys any differently than I treat my own kids.
He treats everybody as equals. There's no individuals, or as a team. We win as a team, lose as a team, so everything's just as a team.
When they get home, the parents take care of them. When they're here at school, I take care of them. And I have that understanding with the parents through meetings that we have prior to the season.
There are many players who come to this program with having problems at home and having problems in classrooms, and Coach Sweeney has really helped them out a lot.
And sometimes a quiet voice of reason does a lot to calm nerves on both sides. And on a number of instances, I was able to facilitate kids getting together closer with their family.
Last year I was having a little bit of grade troubles, and Coach Sweeney would meet me at 6:30 in the morning before school to help me prepare for exams. Got me to get my grades up.
Yeah, I think that's probably a more important role for me as a coach than teaching them baseball, is to bring them together with their family. I really enjoy working with kids. I think the youth of America are very strong. They're good human beings. My wife tells me all the time that there are no bad kids, and I subscribe to that 100%. If I can have an influence on one of these guys and make them understand that, you know what, I can be a better human being because of what Coach Sweeney taught me. I'm doing my job and I'm doing what God wants me to do, and that makes me a more complete person. I'm Michael Peter Sweeney, head baseball coach, Ontario High School.
Coaches make a difference in the lives of the people they work with. We want you to meet veteran coach Mike Sweeney Sr., father to Major League All-Star and coach to high school teams in Southern California. Mike is the father of 8 wonderful children. His son, Mike, who's in the big leagues, was number 2 of the 8. Having such a large family, were they all involved in sports, Mike?
Actually, been all but 2. We have 2 daughters, well, and that's debatable whether they were involved in sport or not. They're cheerleaders, and we have quite a debate in the family as to whether cheerleading is or isn't a sport. But 6 of them played competitive athletic sports, and 2 of them, they tell me they're athletes, but I say they're cheerleaders.
It's debatable.
Yes.
You're big enough, people will say he might have been an athlete, and you were. You played ball in the California League for a couple of years.
Yes, sir. Up north in Washington and Oregon and up in that area, Montana. But yes, played in the California Angels organization.
Right, and did you give it up because of the size of the family and feeling that you had to go and produce more money, or what happened as to why you stopped your professional career?
Well, my wife and I had started a family. We had 2 children, our oldest daughter, Christine, and young Mike, and I felt it was time to go out and get a real job, something that I could count on to support our family.
Now, the background on Mike, as I understand it, he was born almost 2 months premature. And the story that I heard was he was in an incubator. You put a baseball bat or a plastic bat in the incubator, and then you prayed until you could drop, that he would live. And tell us about that a minute.
That's kind of hard.
Is it?
It was a very difficult time. You know, we're all quite proud when our children are born, specifically our first son. And when Mike was initially born, we thought everything was fine. The doctors came out and said, you know, you have a son. So I went out about Orange County and passed out cigars to all my friends and was celebrating. Then received a phone call that I needed to get back to the hospital. Things weren't going well. So I went back to the hospital, and we were told that Mike had Highland membrane disease, which is the same disease. It's not a full development of the lungs that killed one of President Kennedy's children. And we were told that he had, at best, a 50-50 chance of getting through the night. So, you know, my celebration turned into panic almost, and he was in Orange County Medical Center. I drove around the corner from that hospital and parked in an empty parking lot. Prayed for about 2 hours. Sorry, Vin.
No, it's okay.
But told God that I would surrender my son to him and give up all of my fatherly needs and wants for him, that I wanted him to be this and that, and said, if you'll spare my son and let him live, then your will be done, and whatever you want, that's what will happen.
It's a beautiful story because it worked out so very, very well. It shows your faith and the fact that you've been blessed by God, which is outstanding. Now, once you've produced this large family, you become a coach instead of a player. Tell us about coaching and how that's affected your life.
Coaching has been very good to me. I enjoy working with kids. Obviously, my wife and I have 8 children, so we like kids. And it allows me the opportunity to help them as baseball players or basketball players. I coach both sports. But more importantly, to develop them, young kids, when Mike and the younger boys were in Little League, to be good kids. And now that I'm coaching at the high school level, it allows me to have what I feel an influence on their lives and help turn them into better human beings.
Why the high school level? Not to demean your work, but you would think coaches would like to progress. Okay, I'm high school now, but I'd like to be college someday, etc. But you seem to be very happy where you are at the high school level.
I'm extremely happy. I think kids at the high school level, it's a very influential age. They're becoming young men. They're about ready to step into society. And quite honestly, the kids that we all coach as high school coaches, the number that are going to go on and play at the next level are very slim. The number that will make it professionally is even slimmer. So if I can have a hand in turning a kid's life around and, you know, making him a better member of society and making him a better human being, that's what's important to me. And I feel at the high school level, at that age, it gives me a little bit better conduit to do that.
It's one thing to produce an all-star, as you have. The rest of us, even if we make the team and we can play, we're average with no thought of going to become a professional. What effect do you think does it, playing ball, knowing that you're not going to go anywhere with it, but what does it do to your character and to your values in life?
Well, I think it teaches kids to rely on one another, to make a commitment, and to work hard towards an end. And I think the most important thing that I try to get across to them is they've got to learn to trust and love one another. And with all my high school teams, we're not afraid to use the word love because I think it is so important. And as they go through life, they're going to have to love their family, they're going to have to love their employers and their bosses and whatnot. So I think therein lies the answer.
Interestingly, I grew up in the streets of New York, and yet I was never subjected to the temptations that they're out there today. I mean, my own children, I was scared to death that would they grow up properly. What do you see? Any trends with youngsters at the high school level playing sports?
You know, there are drugs, there's alcohol, and drugs that I've never even heard of. I am somewhat naive. I would like to learn so I can be aware of what the temptations for these young athletes are. The trends that they have are that they want to play for themselves, and that parents are very, very demanding. I think parents see athletics now as a free education or money at the end of the rainbow. And they tend to lose focus on what's important, and that's enjoying the game and loving to play the game itself.
As an experienced coach, if you were advising other coaches who are just starting out, what would you advise them to look for in their charges, in their youngsters?
Honesty. Kids that are going to be honest and forthright. Too many coaches look and want to identify with wins as opposed to development of kids. And that development of kids isn't just as a baseball player or a football player or a basketball player. It's as a kid as a whole. And that whole kid is how well does he do in school? How well does he interact with teachers? Is he respectful to adults? And I think that's what all coaches should look for is how can I find a kid or develop a kid that is going to be a good human being and not just a good athlete?
What about your own personal faith? And we know how strong that is. In this day and age, there's almost separation of church and state. How can your faith influence the kids that are playing ball for you?
I'm a walk-on coach. I do not teach. I'm retired from the beer industry. Therefore, I am not paid a lot of money for what I do. So I kind of step outside the box a little bit once in a while, and I'm not afraid to share a gospel or a homily from the previous Sunday with my players if I feel it's something that they can learn from. And You know, I feel it through example, and I will allow my guys to wear rosaries or medals. I will allow my guys to wear those at practice, and a number of them do, to express their faith and let them know that I support that.
Well, your children count upon you as a major blessing in their lives, and I'm sure the youngsters who are under your tutelage are also feeling the same way, Mike, and continued success with that strong faith, and I'm sure you're producing some wonderful youngsters in and around Orange County.
Well, thank you so much, Vin.
Well, next, we're going to meet Kristen Sheehan from the University of Notre Dame's Play Like a Champion program. She'll share some ideas about helping kids get the most from their early sports experiences. Now, Kristen Sheehan and her husband are raising 3 children. She's the co-director of the University of Notre Dame's Play Like a Champion Today. That's a great program. And Kristen, welcome to Faith Bowl 4.
Thank you, Vin.
What about Play for a Champion Today? Where did that name come from? How did it work out?
Well, Play Like a Champion Today is actually a sign in the Notre Dame football locker room. As the athletes exit the locker room on their way to play, they hit the sign, and they specifically hit the word champion as their commitment to be a true champion.
I see.
And we have the opportunity to use that mantra for our educational program for youth sports. And we think it's perfect. Every piece is important. Sport is games, and they're meant to be played by young people. And often adults forget that, and sometimes they make it a little more work than it is play.
What's the role that faith and values play? I'm talking now at the youngest level. They've never even heard the word champion or the definition. Where does faith and value come in there with the babies?
Sometimes you see parents screaming from the stands, even fighting in the stands. Coaches belittling or criticizing athletes. And there are 15 million young athletes playing sport each year. 35% of them will drop out by the end of that year. And by the age of 13, 70% are done playing sport altogether. Now, if you look at our Catholic leagues, our old CYO or parochial leagues, you might think that things are better in the Catholic system. And yet, according to some research that the University of Notre Dame did, that was actually produced a study called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the reality of youth sport. There's so much good that does come from sport. But there's also a lot of misbehaviors that happen with coaches, with parents, and with athletes. And some people would say, well, not in the Catholic program, but when we separated the data between public-sponsored programs and Catholic-sponsored programs, the Catholic programs actually came out statistically worse on all levels of misbehavior, with coaches, with parents, and with athletes. So we say, why even sponsor sports if we're not going to be truly Catholic in how we entertain our sports, if we're not going to live up to the deepest held values that our church holds dear?
Kristen, can you give us 3 important things for parents to observe when they're watching youngsters play sports?
Sure, Vin. We have 10 commandments for sport parents, which are, of course, the gospel for parents, because parents can build up and enhance the sport experience. In some cases, they can destroy it or ruin it for kids. And so just to highlight a couple of those commandments, number 1 is to pray with your child before a game or practice, thanking God for the opportunity that they have to play. Number 2 is to remain calm in the sport environment as a spectator and in control of your words and actions, sometimes taking a deep breath or even removing yourself from the situation if you're getting angry. And then this one might be the most important one, and that is to express your unconditional love for your child, regardless of the outcome of the contest.
What about the coaches? Are there a couple of things a coach should keep in mind when he's observing the athletes?
We train coaches to understand their role as a coach, as a minister. The Latin term ministerium means service. And a coach, especially in a Catholic league or a Catholic school, serves young people, their families, and the church community. That coach represents Christ in their role to that child and all that he or she offers that young person. And then we help coaches to understand how to wholly develop an athlete. not just physically, but emotionally, morally, and spiritually through sport. The venue is rich and ripe for that opportunity. And yet sometimes coaches neglect the development level except just developing physical skills. And then finally, we do help coaches understand how to work effectively with parents as partners.
Can you tell us some of the values, maybe a story or two that you've seen about your participation, your program, and the children and the athletes?
You know, when we do our workshops, sometimes coaches, we have videos in there where it might display a little out of control coaching behavior, and coaches will say, that was me. That was my light bulb moment. I did that. I lived through my kids, through my athletes or my own children. And so when a coach sees that and then sees the power that they have to love a child into whole development, and we believe every child can be a champion, then it's a powerful moment. It helps them to see beyond the outcome of a contest and see how they can develop a young person and really help them to be a disciple of Christ, which is, developing the kingdom of God here on earth.
I think you'd know for sure that all kids can benefit from participating in sports. A boom has happened in the past 30 years in sports programs for girls. So Kristen will be back in a moment to talk with us specifically about girls and sports on Faith Bowl 4. Kristen, tell us about the potential for young women in sports and how times have changed.
Well, since Title IX in 1972, the number of girls playing sport has gone from 1 in 25 to 1 in 3, which is fantastic. Knowing all that sport brings to people in general, that young girls can experience these growth qualities in their own lives. Some of the things that we see from girls in sport is that high school girls who play sport are much less likely to be involved in an unintended pregnancy. They're more likely to have better grades and to graduate from high school. We know that young women who play sport have a healthier body image about themselves than women who do not play sport. We see higher levels of self-confidence and self-esteem, and thus lower levels of depression in women when they play sport. However, the research by the Women's Sport Foundation found that the number of women by the age of 12 who drop out of sport completely is still 6 times higher than for boys. And in fact, girls in urban areas seem to be the worst off. In urban poor areas, 1 in 4 girls in 9th through 12th grade have never had an opportunity to participate in sport, as compared to 1 in 6 boys in the same schools. So we still have a long way to go, especially being what we would call champions for all children.
You know, Kristen, when I was in school, I played some baseball in high school and college, and I'm just wondering about team sports today, baseball, softball, involving young girls. Is it the same or is it different for boys and girls to play team sports?
Well, I think you have the same teamwork happening, and you have the same opportunity to enculture those socio-moral values that teamwork builds. Things like understanding justice, compassion, integrity, honesty, working together for a common good, forgetting about the self and building up the team. In fact, we would say that is excellent citizenship education as well.
You're a champion, Kristen. Thank you so very much. Kristen Sheehan, who's the co-director of Play Like a Champion Today, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have a great athlete to talk about his life in Major League Baseball and how coaching helped him become the 5-time All-Star he was.
Some of the greatest memories that I have as a kid were playing board games with my sisters, playing catch with my dad in the back, helping my mom cook breakfast on Sunday after Mass. I mean, those are the things that you can't put a price tag on. And growing up in a big family, that's what it was all about, was love. I think one of the greatest gifts that a father can pass on to his son is a gift that You know, he believes in him. I remember my dad looking me in the eye and saying, son, if you apply yourself, if you work hard, if you make sacrifices, you're gonna have a chance to play professional baseball. I remember that day like it was yesterday, because it was like my dad was putting this confidence into me, this belief like, hey, I believe in you, son. And I took off with that. There's no greater feeling than feeling loved by my mom and dad. And now as a parent, there's no greater joy that I ever get out of it than loving my children. Right before the first playoff game of my entire Major League career, we're getting ready for the biggest game, you know, definitely of my career, but yet the greatest moment of that was after our workout, when my dad, myself, and my son Michael, the three Mike Sweeneys, we went out to left field and threw BP to MJ. And seeing him hit those balls in the stands and seeing him giggle, and me, my dad, and my son out there in a Major League ballpark together, where all of our dreams really began as young boys, and coming together at one, nothing better, nothing better.
I'm Vin Scully here on Faith Bowl 4 with 16-year Major League Baseball veteran Mike Sweeney, 5-time All-Star, but also a husband, father, and man of faith. Now this is off the script. This is just between you and me. I'm going to take you back to Ash Wednesday, 1999. You have sore knees, yes. You're not feeling very well, you're just a couple of days from spring training, and you're worrying, maybe my career is over. So you do what your father would do, what your grandfather would do, yes. You go to church.
Man, Vin, that was one of the most impactful days of my life. You know, I was a Major League ball player of about 2 or 3 years. At the time, I was a catcher for the Kansas City Royals. My career was really up in jeopardy. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember going to longtime left-handed pitcher Tom Bergmeyer, who was a coach on the Royals at the time. And I said, Bergie, you know, I have people tell me in the newspapers and on the sports talk radio shows that they're predicting that I'm not going to be a Royal next year. I'm going to get released or sent down to the minor leagues or even traded. You know, what are your thoughts on that? And he says, he goes, Mike, they're telling you the truth. And I said, well, Bergie, you know, you're a man of God. You're a Catholic man. I mean, shoot me straight. You're like, what are the chances of me being a Kansas City Royal this year? And he says, you want the truth, kid? I said, absolutely. He said, well, I was just in meetings this afternoon, and your name was brought up, and your future with the organization was spoken about. And if you want the truth, the chance of you being a Kansas City Royal this year is 0%. Wow. So that evening was Ash Wednesday, and I went to Mass, and I didn't know what to pray, but my heart was hurting. My future was unclear, and my life was really a mess. I was a single man with really no direction. My faith in Christ was the most important thing to me at that time, but I don't think I understood how much God loved me and how much He had a plan for my life. So I go to church that evening, and I can't tell you, Vin, a word that was spoken by the priest. But I can tell you, while I was in prayer and while tears filled my eyes and dripped down my cheeks and landed upon my Bible that was down at my knees, I looked down at my Bible and I saw this little sticker that a friend had given me. It was a sticker of a tandem bicycle. And he said, Mike, you know, I challenge you to, you know, place your faith in Christ and trust Him to be on the front seat of that bicycle. And he says, Mike, your job as a man of God, as a Catholic man of God, is to trust Christ, but to be on the back seat, and don't just be dead weight, but you pedal your heart out. You sweat, you bleed, but you trust. And I slapped it on my Bible. I said, amen to that. I'm with you. It's all good. Well, I didn't realize about a year later that sticker was going to impact my life the way it did. Mm-hmm. That night, I looked down as tears fell off my cheeks. And as I looked down at that sticker, through my chaos and through my prayers to our Lord, I felt the Lord whisper to my heart, Mike, have you really put me on the front seat of that bike? And in that church, I felt like Christ was sitting with me in the pew. Rather than feeling all alone, I now felt like I was with my King. And I was sitting on the lap of my Father, and He was stroking my back saying, son, I'm here. It's going to be okay, but I need you to trust me. And as I prayed that night, I said, Father, you know what? I've never really trusted you with my career. In fact, I've never really trusted you with every part of my life, including my dating life. In fact, Lord, tonight I promise you, in the name of Jesus, that I'm going to sit on the back seat of this bike, And all I want to do is sit on that back seat where those handlebars cannot turn, and I want to sweat, and I want to pedal, and I want to bleed for you. But I am going to trust you. And if I end up in the minor leagues, if I end up bagging groceries back in Ontario, California, where I grew up, if I end up getting traded to another organization, if I end up defying all the odds and staying with the Royals, so be it. But you know what? I'm sick of trying to play for the audience around me. I want to begin playing for the audience of one. All of a sudden, I could breathe. Freedom. I didn't feel like I had these big 100-pound dumbbells on my shoulders. And I left that church that night with a sense of freedom, knowing that all I have to do daily is just pedal and trust that God's going to be in control of my life. I go to spring training in '99 with a new freedom, because I wasn't trying to please my manager, my GM, the fans, the publicists that are writing about me. All I was doing was simply just pedaling. And it gave me freedom. I went on the baseball field, and I had the best spring training of my life. I laugh with Tom Bergmeyer even to today when we look back on that February day in 1999 when he said, Mike, the chance of you being a Kansas City Royal is 0%. We laugh about it because God had plans, and he used that to bring me to my knees, to help me become the man that I am today. And lastly, I didn't date a girl for over 2 years. And when I made the All-Star team, ironically, in 2001, God brought my wife back into my life. And at that moment, now my heart was restored. And 6 months later, I was engaged. 9 months later, we were married. About 15, 16 months after we were married, we brought into the world our first son. So I think God, he whispers to us when we're on the mountaintops. He screams to us when we're in the storms. And I was thankful that I went through that storm in my life, because I heard the voice of God screaming to me. And thankfully, I responded.
You responded, and apparently you rode the bicycle very well, because if I remember in 1999, you were right there with a record. You had an RBI in 13 straight games.
Hey, not bad for the guy that they said was going to be the 25th guy in the team.
Exactly, exactly. They also, I forget what year it was, but I know George Brett had part of it. You had the Kansas City Royals shirt with a big C on it for captain.
Yes.
That had to be a touching moment.
Yeah, Vin, before the 2001 season, we're getting ready for opening day, and Tony Pena is our manager, and life is great. He comes in and gives an enthusiastic speech, and he says, men, before we take the field, George Brett, Mr. Kansas City Royal, is going to come in here. He has to say one word to you guys. So in comes Mr. Royal, George Brett, and he says, before you guys take the field, he said, there's a man in here that needs to take his jersey off because I have a new one for him. And he is the one that kind of gave me the title of captain of the Kansas City Royals. And ironically, George Brett was the last captain of that team, and there hasn't been one since. Even though I wore that jersey with pride and that C on my chest, I felt like I never maybe lived up to it on the field because of back injuries and knee injuries. But I'll tell you what, I bled, and I fought for that team, and I did wear that uniform with pride.
And I'm sure they were thrilled to have you wear it.
Yeah.
We'll be back with more Faith Bowl 4. Let's take a look at a coach and his relationship. As a player, do you think you affected the character of any of the players on the team?
I think I did. I would hope I did. Carlos Beltran, the superstar with the New York Mets, he always said, hey, Sweeney, the C on your chest, it doesn't stand for Capitan, it stands for Caballo.
Caballo, the horse.
The horse. And, little things like that. Other guys would come up to me and say, Mike, that C on your chest, that stands for Christian. That stands for Catholic. That's what that means. And I've had dozens of players over the years come up to me and say, Mike, because of my time playing with you, I've become this man. I went through the RCIA program. I was baptized a Catholic. I received Christ into my life because of my relationship with you. So even though on paper, due to some injuries in Kansas City, maybe I didn't perform as well as the fans had hoped. But I think in the hearts of men, I think I made an impact on some lives.
Just to put it in proper perspective, I mean, Mike is not just this saintly boy playing baseball all the time. Let's face it, you were suspended 10 days, right?
I was.
I mean, you got into a fight.
Yes, I did. With Mr. Jeff Weaver.
Right.
And you know, Jeff Weaver at the time, he was with you in LA this past year.
Sure.
Great man.
Yeah.
And he was a competitor and one of the better pitchers in the game. And at the time, he was in Detroit, I was in Kansas City, and we always had some really big battles, it seemed like every week, because we played each other so often. And one day, you know, Jeff shouted something at me, and I lost my cool. And I messed up. And again, like I said, Vin, God whispers to us on the mountaintops and shouts to us in the storms.
Hey, Sweeney, cool it.
Cool it. I wish I would have heard it at home plate, but I didn't. But the neat thing was, I did make a mistake, and I charged the mound and caused a big, you know, melee.
It's part of the game.
Yeah, part of the game, and I got suspended 10 games because of it.
Right.
But the cool thing is reconciliation.
Now, how about as a parent?
Yeah.
Never mind with fellow professionals, your children.
Yes.
How will you coach them? Or supposing, I used to tease the late Don Drysdale, who had all these tremendous physical abilities, and his wife is a Hall of Famer basketball player. And I used to say, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if your first son becomes a shepherd, you know, because it just doesn't work that way a lot of times.
Exactly.
How about your relationship to that baby of yours now?
Yes.
Growing up,
Yes.
will you pressurize him? What will you do about sports?
You know what's funny, Vin, is, you know, my dad, he spoke with you just a little while ago about him sacrificing. He, you know, was a professional baseball player with the California Angels, and many guys like Frank Tanana and Papa Jack played with my dad, and they said, oh, your dad was a stud. He could have made it to the big leagues as a center fielder. And yet he gave up his dream to give us kids a dream. And you know what? Maybe now's the time that I do the same for my kids. I don't know yet what my future holds in store for it. But I do know that I'm going to pass on the same gifts that my parents have passed on to me and my siblings. And the main thing is sacrifice. I'm going to work hard to provide for them. And the biggest thing is love. You know, what does Scripture say? If you have the faith to move mountains yet not have love, you have nothing. I just want to love on my kids so much. In fact, just last night I was in the batting cage with my little boy Michael. He says, Dad, I want to go out and play football with you in the backyard. I want to play pool on the pool table. I want to go shoot hoops, and then I want to go play baseball with you in the batting cage. And I said, I'm all yours, son.
Right.
And the main thing I told him is, I love you, son, and Daddy's so proud of you. And it's like in Scripture, you know, when Jesus, after he's baptized in the Jordan, I think the reference is Mark chapter 1, verse 11. He hears the famous words, you are my beloved son, with whom I am well pleased. As a young boy, that's what I always yearned to hear from my father. You are my beloved son, with whom I am well pleased. And I think for kids in today's world, they have so much pressure on them, but yet they so desire to hear those words. You are my beloved, with whom I am well pleased.
One last question. When we first came on the show, I mentioned the fact that over my 60-some-odd years broadcasting, the things that really stick out with me are not the years when the team won, but the years when the team lost.
Yes.
So for one last moment, how do you and how would you tell youngsters to take defeat?
I think of the word encourage, and the word comes from the ability to put courage into someone else. So whether it be a pat on the back, whether it be a hug, whether it be telling someone, I think you're great, whether it be telling the 15th kid on the 15-man Little League team, hey, I'm going to bat you cleanup today because I believe in you. That's putting courage into that young child. And I think for me, playing on some tough teams where we didn't win, I was that guy in the locker room that I knew I wasn't going to be a Hall of Famer in Cooperstown like you, but I knew that I was going to love on my teammates and I was going to encourage them. And whether they were the star pitcher or the 25th guy on the team, I was going to put courage into him. Great example. I was in Oakland a couple years ago. In the 9th inning, we're playing the California Angels. And Bobby Guerin comes up to me and says, Mike, we're pinch hitting for you here. And I said, what? You're pinch hitting for me? Yeah, we're going to pinch hit for you. Young Derek Barton, left-handed, against Frankie Rodriguez. We feel like he might have a better shot against Frankie because Frankie has trouble against left-handed hitters. So my initial response was, well, I know I can do the job here, but I knew my teammates were watching what was going on. So I turned around and I looked at Derek Barton and I said, Derek, you're going to do it, buddy. There's nobody else in this dugout that I would want to hit for me than I want you. So I said, give me a hug, and I believe in you. And here's a rookie. He's only been in the big leagues about a month, and he goes up there and throws out an unbelievable at-bat against Frankie Rodriguez. Encourage, love, because that's what everyone's looking for.
Someone who probably put some courage in you is your dad. And so Mike Sweeney Sr. will be with us right after this. Right now on Faithful 4, we have All-Star Major League Baseball player Mike Sweeney and his dad. Now, Mike, throughout your baseball career in the low minors all the way up to the big leagues, you've had plenty of hitting coaches, and yet I've read that you think your dad was the best hitting coach you ever had. Why?
Oh, hands down. You know, my dad has been my hitting coach since I think the day I was born, when he put the little plastic bat in my incubator. But my dad, you know, he's got a way. He's been my hitting coach since I was a little guy, and I've had some great hitting coaches along the way. But my dad he knows the game. He played professionally, and there's no doubt in my mind that my dad could go and be, you know, a Rudy Jaramillo or a Kevin Long in today's Major League game. But right now he feels led to, you know, put his energy and have an impact on the high school athletes of
What was his biggest flaw? What was it you had to overcome with young Mike?
Well, actually, he was too nice.
Okay.
He was a very nice young man and was a little bit lacking in competitive spirit until we put him on the mound. And when we put him on the mound, that competitive spirit came out. And
you know, one of the saddest stories I ever heard of, and you have to go way back, the United States Military Academy at West Point. The head football coach was Earl Blake, and his son Bobby was the quarterback on the team. Well, now, right away, that's got to be a little difficult. You're the man, and your son is the quarterback. What was really tough was they had a scandal at West Point. They called it the cheating scandal, but it wasn't really cheating. What it was, when you go to West Point, apparently, you're supposed to do your own thing, and you're not supposed to help anybody else, as I understand it. Well, on the football team, there were several players, we'll say they were all linemen, but maybe not, who were having a lot of trouble with math. And Bobby, Earl's son, would go and violate the rule and help them with their math. And he was penalized, dropped from the team and everything else. Can you imagine being the father of a son who didn't really do anything wrong except the code of the cadet? Tough moment for a father.
I'd had to fight the academy. I would have patted him on the back and told him, good job for helping your teammates.
Yeah. What about when you're sitting in the stands watching him play? Is it tough on you?
Yes. I kind of live and breathe with every pitch and every swing. Just as a father, you want for your children to do so well. And, you know, Mike, fortunately, has had a very good career. He's been successful about 3 out of every 10 at-bats. Well, I really celebrate those 3 out of 10. And the 7 out of 10, they really eat me up.
Well, now, when was it when Mike was younger and you thought, wow, my kid's liable to be a big league player? When did you think that? Or did you?
Well, you know, I really didn't, because as you know, there are so many components necessary to be a big league ball player. I recognized very early, probably when Mikey was, I don't know, 3 years old, that he was a very, very good athlete. He loved the game of baseball and was willing to work at it. Shoot, I took him to a batting cage in Buena Park, California, Home Run Park, and stuck him in a batting cage at 4 years old. Got hit in the face with a ball, and I don't think he even cried. You know, he backed out of the cage and said, Daddy, I want to hit some more, and jumped right back in the cage. And his athleticism showed itself. He was a shortstop and a pitcher growing up. And I think it was probably when he won the batting title in the Carolina League in 1995 that I finally started thinking, you know what, young man's got a chance. Not only because of his God-given abilities, but because of the heart he has and as hard as he's willing to work.
Now, you're both on the board of Catholic Athletes for Christ. Tell us about your faith and how it works in with sports and a relationship of father and son.
Well, I think Pope John Paul II said it best. He said, if you have a heart, you're an athlete. And for me, you know, I want to use the gift that God's given me to play baseball, to love on kids and then show them that the love that the Father has for them as well. And oftentimes through our foundation, we would do baseball clinics in Kansas City. We'd bring out several hundred kids. We teach them the basics of baseball as we would at like a spring training day. And at the end, I'd say, you know what? Baseball's great. I love the game of baseball, but there's something that makes my heart full, and it's not baseball. And I get to share with them about my faith, my Catholic faith in Jesus Christ. And there's one kid that I still keep in touch with today, and a little chubby redhead kid came up to me after a baseball camp one day where I shared my faith, and he says, Mr. Sweeney, missing his front two teeth, little Sammy Browning, I'll never forget his name. Someday, because of what you've taught me today, I want to become a Catholic priest.
Wow.
And I still keep in touch with this young man today. And I don't know if he's become a priest yet, but I know he's a young man that's on fire for Christ. Because why? His parents read the sports page that Mike Sweeney was having a baseball camp. And he came out and loved baseball, played baseball, but he embraced the love that God had for him. And, you know, little things like that are so vital to what Catholic Athletes for Christ is all about. We're trying to take these young warriors and build them up to be warriors for Christ through athletics.
And what about your role as a coach? Does your faith come forth as far as teaching the kids?
Absolutely. You know, we have rules and standards within every program that I've coached where profanity is not allowed, abusing equipment, abusing teammates. And you know, I think a story that kind of tells it all is when I was at Colony High School in Ontario, California, there was a somewhat disabled young man who I used to see at Mass from the time he was like 3 or 4 years old. James Thompson is his name. And he finally came into high school as a freshman, and his dad brings James out to the baseball field one day and says, Coach Sweeney, is anything he can do out here in your baseball program? I said, absolutely. Brad, we'll get him involved. And that young man became involved with me personally. He knew I was Catholic because I saw him at Mass almost from his infancy. We as a baseball program adopted him, made him one of us. And to this day, I still see that young man at Mass as an usher, and he's still somewhat disabled. So,
wow. Well, you know, you're both heroes to many others. What about yourself? Do you have a hero?
Well, growing up, people, you know, and even into my big league career, people would always say, well, who's your hero? And some people may say, oh, it was Brad Pitt or John Wayne or President so-and-so. But this guy right here, he's been my hero since I was a little boy.
And well-deserved honor, too. What about you, Mike?
Well, my father was always my hero. He was a career military.
Yes. All right, I'll tell you what. Tell you about his father. Mike Sr.'s father, your grandfather, was a commander in the Navy, had gone to Harvard, played baseball, and went to war, World War II in Korea. Never really told his wife that he was at war. He said, well, I'm just going on maneuvers and all that. Didn't tell her that he had actually been in the war doing battle for maybe 3.5 years later. And he became very successful, had a business, only to have the partner run away with all the money, and he's busted. And what does he do? He didn't declare bankruptcy. He certainly could have done that. Instead, he drove a beer truck for 25 years. And young Mike had no idea that he was anything but a beer truck driver, right? Until you finally found out. Now there's a hero for both of you, right?
Amen, yes. My dad has been my hero since I was a little boy, and Grandpa Sweeney was Dad's hero since he was a little boy.
You're both heroes. You both really are worthwhile people. I'm honored to sit here and talk to you both.
Thank you, Vin.
Thank you so much.
They're a highlight. They certainly are. Well, we've come to the end of our time today. Sure hope you enjoyed it. The program was brought to you by Catholic Athletes for Christ, serving Catholic athletes in the practice of their faith and sharing the gospel in and through sports. CAC, working with athletes at all levels, promoting a Catholic sports culture. And the Knights of Columbus, the largest Catholic fraternal and service organization in the world. Family Theater Productions, the Catholic Family Media Center on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood since 1947, promoting the truth that the family that prays together stays together. I'm Vin Scully. We've been here with Kristen Sheehan of Play Like a Champion Today program, and with Coach Mike Sweeney Sr. and Major League Baseball star Mike Sweeney. Thank you so much for watching Faith Bowl 4. May you be blessed in sports, family, and faith.